April 30, 2025. A Wednesday that began like any other in Leeds, UK, until police officers approached apartment 14B. The door that should have revealed a vibrant 32-year-old Nigerian nurse named Nena Murian instead concealed a scene that would haunt everyone involved. Just days earlier, Nena had been dancing at her traditional marriage introduction in Nigeria, her face glowing with joy as family members celebrated her engagement. Her colleagues at the hospital described her as radiantly happy upon her return to the UK. No one could have predicted that her bright future would be extinguished so suddenly. The first alarm sounded when Nena failed to appear for her Monday shift, something completely out of character for the dedicated healthcare professional known for her reliability. Calls went unanswered, messages unread. By Wednesday, the worst fears were confirmed. What transforms love into possession? How does affection warp into obsession? And why didn't anyone see the danger approaching until it was too late? This isn't just another crime story. This is about a woman who crossed oceans to build a life of purpose, whose compassion touched countless patients, and whose death exposes the hidden dangers that can lurk within relationships. By subscribing to this channel, you become part of a community fighting for justice, not just for Nena, but for all victims whose voices have been silenced. Your engagement helps ensure these stories reach those who might recognize similar warning patterns in their own lives before tragedy strikes. One comment, one share could literally save someone's life. Now, let's uncover what really happened to Nena Murian. Born and raised in Nigeria, Nena Murian embodied determination from an early age. Her path to nursing wasn't just a career choice, it was a calling. After completing her education in Nigeria, she made the bold decision to relocate to the United Kingdom, seeking greater opportunities and experiences in healthcare. Leeds became her new home, a city where she would build her professional reputation at a local hospital. Colleagues quickly noticed something special about Nena. Beyond her technical skills, she possessed an extraordinary capacity for empathy that transformed patient care. She remembered everyone's names, their families, their stories, recalled a fellow nurse. Patients would specifically ask for her because she made them feel seen during their most vulnerable moments. Nena's impact extended beyond hospital walls. Her social media presence revealed a woman embracing life fully, dancing in her apartment after long shifts, sharing honest reflections about the immigrant experience, and posting motivational messages that inspired her growing following. She had this laugh that could fill an entire room, remembered a friend. Even during the most stressful days at work, she found ways to lift everyone's spirits. Despite the distance, Nena maintained close connections with her family in Nigeria through regular video calls and visits when possible. She navigated the challenges of building a life abroad with remarkable resilience, creating a community of friends who became her chosen family in the UK. Her colleagues described her as a beacon of kindness and empathy who approached her work with unwavering dedication. Patients often mentioned how Nena would sit with them during difficult moments, holding their hands and offering comfort that went far beyond medical care. What made Nena extraordinary wasn't just her professional accomplishments, but her authentic presence. She brought her full self to every interaction. Her Nigerian heritage, her immigrant journey, her compassionate heart, creating connections that transcended cultural differences. The hospital corridors where she once walked now feel emptier without her presence. The patients whose lives she touched carry memories of her gentle care, and those who knew her personally remember a woman whose light shone brightly, a light extinguished far too soon. By early 2025, Nena's life was evolving in exciting ways. While building her nursing career in Leeds, she connected with a man from her homeland of Nigeria. Their relationship blossomed quickly, rooted in shared cultural understanding and mutual respect. In April 2025, Nena took a brief leave from the hospital to travel back to Nigeria for a significant milestone, her traditional marriage introduction ceremony. This cultural celebration marks the formal meeting between both families, the first official step toward marriage in Nigerian tradition. Photos from the event captured Nena in traditional attire, her face radiant with joy as family members surrounded her with blessings and celebration. The ceremony represented everything she had worked toward, a harmonious blend of her Nigerian roots and the independent life she had built abroad. "She called me right after the ceremony," a close colleague later shared. "I'd never heard her so happy. She kept saying how everything was finally falling into place." For Nena, this celebration wasn't just about romance. It represented a new chapter where her personal happiness matched her professional success. She returned to the UK with renewed energy and purpose, her phone filled with photos she eagerly shared with friends and coworkers. Her social media posts reflected this optimism. "New beginnings, new blessings," she wrote beneath a photo of herself at the airport, returning to Leeds. Friends commented on her visible happiness, noting how she seemed to glow with excitement about the future. What Nena couldn't have known was that someone was watching these celebrations with mounting rage, someone who felt entitled to control her future and couldn't accept her happiness with another man. As she unpacked her suitcase and prepared to return to work, settling back into her Leeds apartment, the shadow of danger was already approaching. The joy of her engagement would make what followed even more devastating, a stark contrast between the bright future she had planned and the darkness that awaited her. Before finding love in Nigeria, Nena had been involved in a long-term relationship in the UK. What began as a promising connection gradually transformed into something troubling. Friends later revealed that the relationship had become increasingly strained over time, with her boyfriend exhibiting controlling behaviors that concerned those close to her. "It started with small things," explained a friend who wished to remain anonymous. "He'd question who she was texting, why she was working late shifts, or who she was spending time with. Eventually, she began declining social invitations to avoid his questioning afterward. The relationship followed a familiar pattern, initial charm giving way to possessiveness, monitoring, and attempts to isolate her from support networks. For Nena, the realization didn't come all at once, but accumulated through countless moments of discomfort and restriction. By late 2024, she had gathered the courage to end the relationship. It was a decision that required tremendous strength. Leaving a controlling partner often represents the most dangerous period in such relationships. Nena believed she had successfully moved forward, focusing on her career and eventually opening her heart to someone new. What she couldn't have anticipated was that her ex-boyfriend never truly accepted the breakup. In his mind, she remained his possession. Each step she took toward independence became, in his distorted thinking, a personal betrayal. When news of her engagement reached him, something fundamental broke. The man who once claimed to love her began plotting destruction. His behavior escalated from monitoring to obsession, from resentment to rage. He created fake social media accounts to track her activities, monitored her location, and even gained unauthorized access to her phone. Digital evidence later revealed the extent of his surveillance. He knew about her trip to Nigeria, her engagement celebration, and her return date to the UK. He tracked her work schedule and movements, building a detailed picture of her daily life without her knowledge. Most disturbing was a message he sent to a friend in Nigeria: "If I can't have her, nobody will." Words that would prove prophetic rather than empty threats. In the months following their breakup, he sent Nena messages that ranged from pleading reconciliation to thinly veiled threats. She had largely ignored these communications, focusing instead on her new relationship and future plans. Investigators would later discover that he had been outside her apartment multiple times in the weeks before her death, watching and waiting. His obsession had transformed into a calculated plan, one that would culminate in violence. For Nena, the danger remained invisible. She had moved on emotionally and practically, unaware that her ex-partner was becoming increasingly fixated on preventing her happiness with someone else. She had no reason to believe that returning to her apartment after her hospital shift on April 27th would lead to anything but rest before another workday. The contrast between her hopeful future and his destructive obsession created the perfect storm, one that would end with 2 lives lost and countless others forever changed. Sunday, April 27, 2025, began as an ordinary workday for Nena. She arrived at the hospital for her shift, greeting colleagues with her characteristic warmth. Nothing in her demeanor suggested concern or fear. She moved through her duties with the same attentive care she always showed her patients. She was in particularly good spirits that day, a co-worker later recalled. She mentioned plans to video call her fiancé that evening and showed us some wedding ideas she'd been collecting on her phone. Nena completed her shift around 7:30 p.m., exchanging goodbyes with colleagues as she left the hospital. Security footage would later show her entering her apartment building at approximately 8:15 p.m., stopping briefly to collect mail from her box in the lobby. She appeared relaxed, unaware of any threat. That evening she had planned to video call her fiancé in Nigeria, a call that never connected. Her last known communication was a text to him at 8:43 p.m., "Home now, will call after shower." It was the final message she would ever send. Monday morning arrived, and Nena's absence was immediately noticed at the hospital. Her 7:00 a.m. shift began without her, something completely out of character for a nurse known for her reliability and punctuality. "We tried calling her multiple times," her supervisor explained. "When the calls went straight to voicemail, we became concerned. Nena was never late, and she always called if there was any issue." By midday, her colleagues' worry had intensified. Calls continued to go unanswered, messages remained unread. A co-worker volunteered to visit her apartment during lunch break, but received no response to knocks on the door. "I had this feeling in my stomach that something was wrong," the co-worker later shared. "It just wasn't like her to disappear without a word." Tuesday brought mounting anxiety among Nena's friends and colleagues. A close friend who had been trying to reach her for nearly 48 hours made the decision to file a missing person report with local police. "I told them this wasn't normal behavior for her," the friend explained, "especially after just returning from her engagement celebration. She was happy, making plans. There was no reason for her to vanish." Have you ever experienced that gut feeling when something isn't right with someone you care about? That instinct that pushes you to act even when there might be a simple explanation? I wonder how many lives have been saved because someone trusted that feeling enough to check on a friend. By Tuesday evening, Nena had been unreachable for over 48 hours. Her absence from work, her silence on social media, and her unresponsiveness to messages all pointed to a situation far beyond a simple miscommunication or forgotten shift. Something was terribly wrong. On Wednesday, April 30, police officers arrived at Nena's Leeds apartment to conduct a welfare check. After receiving no response to their knocks and with growing concern based on the missing person report filed the previous day, they made the decision to enter the premises. What they found inside would shock the community and devastate all who knew Nena. Her body lay in the bedroom, bearing multiple stab wounds. The scene spoke of a violent personal attack, one driven by rage rather than any other motive. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Nena either knew her attacker or had left her door unlocked, believing herself safe in her own home. In another area of the apartment, officers made a second discovery: the body of Nena's ex-boyfriend. He had taken his own life after committing the murder. A knife, later confirmed to be the murder weapon, was recovered at the scene. The evidence pointed clearly to a murder-suicide, the final act of control by a man who couldn't accept rejection. The medical examiner would later determine that Nena had died Sunday night, shortly after returning home from her hospital shift. She had defensive wounds on her hands and arms, indicating she had fought desperately for her life in her final moments. News of the discovery spread quickly through the hospital where she worked. Colleagues who had been hoping for a misunderstanding or temporary absence were confronted with the devastating reality that Nena was gone forever. "We were preparing for her birthday next month," a tearful co-worker shared. "Instead, we're planning a memorial." The Nigerian community in Leeds gathered in shock and grief, struggling to process how a woman who had just celebrated her engagement could be taken so violently just days later. Her fiancé in Nigeria, who had been anxiously awaiting her call since Sunday night, collapsed upon hearing the news. "I need to pause here and address something important. Relationship violence affects millions worldwide, yet it often remains hidden until it's too late. Your engagement with stories like Nena's helps bring these issues into the light. By liking this video and sharing it, you're helping raise awareness that could save someone else from a similar fate. If you know someone in a controlling relationship, reaching out could make all the difference. Remember, your support matters more than you know. The discovery in that Leeds apartment wasn't just the end of Nanea's story. It was a tragic reminder of how quickly control can escalate to violence when rejection occurs. The investigation into Nanea's murder revealed a disturbing pattern of escalation in her ex-boyfriend's behavior. In the months following their breakup, he had become increasingly obsessed with her new relationship. What began as occasional messages asking to reconcile gradually transformed into something more dangerous. Digital forensics uncovered evidence that he had installed spyware on her phone during their relationship, software that continued to give him access to her messages, calls, and location even after they separated. He knew about her trip to Nigeria. He knew about her engagement. He knew her work schedule and when she would be alone. Security footage from the apartment building showed him lurking outside multiple times in the week before the murder. On the night of April 27, he was captured entering shortly after Nanea, having waited for her return from work. The lack of forced entries suggested he either still had a key or she had let him in, perhaps believing he wanted closure or to return belongings. Most chilling was a handwritten letter found beneath her mattress, placed there by him during a previous unauthorized entry to her apartment. In it, he expressed his sense of betrayal and entitlement, calling her a traitor for moving on and referring to her upcoming wedding as an insult to their relationship. Text messages recovered from his phone showed his increasingly unstable state of mind. In the hours before the attack, he sent messages to Nanea that alternated between begging for forgiveness and issuing veiled threats. She had not responded to any of them. Friends later revealed that he had been drinking heavily in the days leading up to the murder, further destabilizing his already precarious mental state. One friend reported receiving a disturbing call from him the night before the murder, during which he spoke cryptically about making things right and ensuring that she'll never forget me. The evidence painted a clear picture. This was not a spontaneous act, but the culmination of months of obsession and planning. He had tracked her movements, monitored her communications, and chosen the moment when she would be most vulnerable. Investigators found that he had searched online for information about how to get into an apartment without a key and making someone regret leaving you in the weeks before the murder. His browser history revealed repeated visits to Nanea's social media profiles, particularly focusing on photos from her engagement ceremony. The knife used in the attack had been purchased just days before, suggesting premeditation rather than opportunity. He had also withdrawn a significant amount of cash and left his apartment in an unusually tidy state. Actions that, in retrospect, indicated preparation for his final act. Perhaps most revealing was a journal found in his apartment documenting his growing obsession. Entries evolved from expressions of heartbreak to declarations of ownership and control. The final entry, dated the morning of the murder, contained just 7 words. "Today she learns she was always mine." For investigators, the case represented a textbook example of how domestic violence escalates when control is threatened. For Nanea's loved ones, it revealed the hidden danger that had been present all along, a danger that became lethal when she dared to pursue happiness on her own terms. Nanea's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Relationship violence rarely begins with physical abuse. It starts with subtle controlling behaviors that gradually escalate, behaviors that might be dismissed or even romanticized in our culture. Looking back at Nanea's relationship with her killer, several concerning patterns emerged. Isolation attempts. He had gradually tried to separate her from friends and family, particularly those who expressed concerns about their relationship. Colleagues noticed she began declining social invitations and seemed less connected to her support network. Privacy violations. His monitoring of her communications represented a severe breach of trust. The spyware installed on her phone allowed him to track her movements and read her private messages long after the relationship ended. Emotional manipulation. Friends reported that he would alternate between excessive affection and cold withdrawal, keeping Nanea in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. possessiveness. He referred to her as his, even after the relationship ended, revealing a fundamental belief that she was property rather than an autonomous person with the right to make her own choices. Inability to accept the breakup, the end of the relationship, triggered escalation rather than acceptance, a dangerous pattern in controlling relationships. For those watching who recognize these patterns in their own relationships or those of loved ones, please know that resources exist to help. National domestic violence hotlines provide confidential support and guidance. Local women's shelters offer safety planning and, when necessary, emergency accommodation. The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is often when the victim attempts to leave. Nenena's story tragically illustrates this reality. Had she been aware of the extent of her ex-boyfriend's obsession, she might have taken additional precautions or sought protection. What makes these situations particularly difficult is that controlling behaviors often intensify gradually, making them harder to identify. Like the proverbial frog in slowly heating water, victims may not recognize the danger until they're already deeply entangled. Nene's case reminds us that the absence of physical violence doesn't mean a relationship is healthy or safe. Control and possession are not expressions of love. They are warning signs of potential danger. The news of Nene's murder sent shockwaves through multiple communities. At the hospital where she worked, colleagues held a memorial service celebrating her life and contributions to patient care. Many spoke of the void her absence created, not just professionally but personally, as she had touched so many lives with her compassion and warmth. "We lost not just an exceptional nurse, but a light in our department," her supervisor said during the service. "Patients still ask about her, not knowing she's gone." Within the Nigerian diaspora in the UK, her death highlighted the particular vulnerabilities faced by immigrant women. Far from extended family networks and traditional support systems, they often navigate relationship difficulties with fewer resources and safety nets. Community organizations responded by establishing support groups specifically addressing the needs of immigrant women in potentially dangerous relationships. The case received coverage in both UK and Nigerian media, bringing attention to the global nature of domestic violence and the need for cross-cultural approaches to prevention and support. In Nigeria, where Nene's family was still reeling from the shock of losing her so soon after celebrating her engagement, conversations began about the importance of recognizing concerning behaviors in relationships. A friend from nursing school established a scholarship in Nene's name, ensuring that her legacy would continue through future generations of compassionate healthcare providers. "She would have wanted something positive to come from this tragedy," the friend explained. "Helping others was at the core of who she was." The hospital where she worked installed a memorial bench in the staff garden with a plaque reading, "In memory of Nene Miriam, whose care and compassion continue to inspire us daily." I'm curious, what country or state are you watching this from? Share in the comments below. Domestic violence knows no borders, and seeing responses from around the world reminds us that we're united in wanting to prevent these tragedies. Nene Miriam was more than the tragic circumstances of her death. She was a daughter, a friend, a healer, a woman of faith and joy. She was someone who crossed oceans to build a better life, who dedicated herself to caring for others, who danced and laughed and loved with her whole heart. The greatest disservice we could do to her memory would be to reduce her to a victim, to let the manner of her death overshadow the vibrancy of her life. Yet we must also acknowledge the lessons her story holds, painful though they may be. For those in controlling relationships, trust your instincts. What feels wrong probably is. Reach out for help, even when it's difficult. There are people who will believe you and support you. For friends and family, listen without judgment when someone shares concerns about their relationship. Be the safe harbor they need. Recognize that leaving is a process, not an event, and your consistent support matters. For communities, create environments where victims feel safe coming forward. Establish resources that address the specific needs of vulnerable populations, including immigrants and those far from family support networks. If this story has moved you, if you believe that no one should suffer as Nena did, I ask you to take action. Subscribe to this channel where we bring attention to these important stories. Share this video to spread awareness. Comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Together, we can honor Nena's memory by working toward a world where everyone can live and love safely. Have you ever witnessed concerning relationship dynamics in your community? What did you do? Your insights could help someone else recognize a dangerous situation before it's too late.